Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career. Cory Warfield here on the show today. He's the founder and chief visionary officer at Shedwool, and we'll talk about what that means, chief visionary officer. But Cory, thanks for being on.
Pleasure to be on, Raul. I almost said it's a pleasure to have you, but I'm being had.
One of the things that I really would like to dive into is the journey that took you to get to where you are right now. Because one of the things that we always highlight is where people are at, but we don't always notice the journey or the pathway. And that's usually should be celebrated as much as the wins.
Love that.
So I'd love to learn a little bit more about your journey and where you're at right now with Shedwool.
Absolutely. So, super abridged version, mid-90s, I worked as a waiter and bartender at 16. I worked at a business school here in Chicagoland where if you weren't taking money for alcohol, you could bartend as long as you had a worker's permit. 16 was the age to work. And so I was bartending at 16. Did that for a couple of years. I was at the Kellogg Business School at Northwestern at the Allen Center, which was only for developed executives that were already in leadership at Fortune, typically 100 companies at the time. And this is mid-90s. Did a great job, learned how to serve, learned how to bartend, learned how to speak a little bit of business. Then I went to college, hated it, just thought I'd take a year off, got a job as a computer programmer, then as a metrologist at a pharmaceutical research company, making great money for an 18-year-old. Decided to stay dropped out of college for a few extra years. 20 some years later, I'm still on that hiatus very happily. But I love that experience, love serving and getting to know people. But I ended up having kind of a very early midlife crisis, went crazy, and then ended up living homeless on the streets for about a year and a half. And again, This is about 20 years ago, end of last millennium. And this guy sleeping in a little tent in the parks and on the side of the road doing that whole thing, right? And young kid. Back then I was decent looking, and so I was still nice and handsome. I was laughing the other day. I think I wore better and more expensive clothes back then than I do now that I'm chairman of a multi-million-dollar tech company, right? But it's one of those things where from that perspective of just building community, helping people, feeling helpless, all of that, I ended up deciding that wasn't my final outcome at I think 19 or 20 years old. Started washing dishes and ended up in this little ski town in Colorado about 20 years ago washing dishes. And I was the only non-skier in the ski town, and I actually had nothing better to do. So I showed up early, stayed late every day, worked 7 days a week, wowed them with my work ethic, cleanest dishes they'd ever seen. And so I got promoted very quickly. Busboy, waiter, started bartending, got certified as a sommelier within about a year and a half, making about six figures then, working, there are 2 off seasons, so working seven months out of the year, making, probably at the time, $85,000 a year, which was amazing. Yeah. Most of it was in cash, had a beautiful place, had a kegerator, a pool table, and it was really just surreal for a young guy that had been on the streets not too, far in the past. And I did that for, obviously not ever, but pretty much forever. I was waiting tables, bartending, running restaurants for many years until just a few years ago. And so I guess 5 years ago, I had an idea that all the scheduling software being used in the restaurant industry was kind of difficult. It all didn't do everything we wanted it to do. I then found out how expensive it was, and it blew my mind that data wasn't being leveraged by software to help inform the scheduling decisions in the restaurant industry. And I'd spent so much time as a manager, as, bartender, all these things where a schedule changes every single shift. And then the worst thing is you have these on-call shifts when you don't know if you're working the next day, and you can't plan anything, whether it's a date, whether it's childcare, anything like that. And it was so frustrating because we would know if we were going to be needed the next day, because we could look at reservations, we knew what the weather was, but the management would make it seem like this big, huge reveal every day at 1 p.m. They tell you if you're working that day or not. And if you wanted to be off,
Oh,
you were
wow.
always called in, even if they needed you. And if you really needed to go in and make the money, they'd always tell you to enjoy the day off, even if you really had nothing going on and couldn't think of anything you'd rather do than go in and make money. So I was very surprised that data wasn't being used to help inform these solutions. And I did some research. I saw no one was doing that in the space, realized the space was fragmented, realized it was a many billion-dollar opportunity. And so I did what very few, of us that are just crazy enough that don't know better do. And I tried to start a tech company, and I tried to teach myself how to code. That didn't work. I did a Craigslist ad because that's all I knew back then. And it's a fun story that I can share in the Cliff Notes or next time, but about that one. But got a technical co-founder, built an MVP, and I spent a couple of years trying to raise money, going through accelerator programs, building some early adopters and some social capital, but we never made money. And I don't care what people tell you, you can't raise money until you make money with a startup. And so it was this kind of vicious cycle. I hadn't paid myself in years. I was going through my life savings and put it in to start the company. And one of the things I did smart, and I changed from CEO to CVO as soon as I could afford to hire an actual CEO, but I started to replace myself. I didn't have an MBA like the people I served in the 90s. I don't know everything that goes into being a CEO. So I found a guy that's run billion-dollar companies in my space for years. He'd been a director of technology at McDonald's, who's a target of ours for years. This guy's been involved in some really big global stuff. Brought him on. Now I am the visionary, and they said, our job is to execute on your vision and to bring this thing to life. But so I brought on a director of marketing and communications that's been in this space. We started to raise money, and now we're kind of in that cycle where people want to invest in us. So we just we're able to keep kind of raising, more and more money. And now we're in the middle of a multi-million-dollar fundraise. And I think that we're finally saying, enough's enough at a certain dollar amount. Now, the closer we get, I think it starts to seem like, well, maybe we'll raise some more because our valuation keeps going up. We'll see, right? That's kind of a weird. Yeah. At some point, we just got, you stop raising money, you got to raise revenue, and thank God we're kind of entering that phase as well.
Yeah.
But really, it was just it was years of I didn't take no for an answer. I didn't listen to the people that said I couldn't do it. I didn't care that we weren't making money, and I became kind of a social media influencer and was able to rally some troops and get some excitement that way, and just find some really non-traditional ways to build up the company. So now as a mentor, and I do a little bit. I prefer to invest my time into companies, but I've done some early stage investments. I help launch a lot of tech companies, help people do that as well. And I think when I always come in is, what were you trying to raise money for? How can we do it without money? Let's do that, right? So I've helped with some fundraisers now, and like I said, we're raising money too. But I love to do things without the capital raise, and I love to do things. I don't own a huge percentage of Shedwool anymore, and I'm a majority shareholder. I'm the chairman of the board, but sometimes people try to hold things a little too close and want a little bit too much of it as well. I diluted and divested with the bigger picture in mind, delegated a lot, and was able to accomplish more than we could have had we raised money when I was trying. And, again, now we've got a full team. Yeah, and I'm very fortunate to have the team now because it's opening doors that would have never opened for us otherwise. But it's really a result of what we did pre-fundraise. And, again, now it's a different world. It's still a foreign world to me to a degree, but it's been fun.
Man, that is a phenomenal story, and a greater bridge version as well. We'll have to go deeper, but I do want to hit on some points that you mentioned. And I think I want to go back to the beginning when you had the idea and when you identified that data wasn't being leveraged. Now, there's two distinctions there, right? The first is that you knew the differentiator between information and leverage. So how can you talk us through that kind of thinking? How did you know to connect those dots with something that can just be seen day to day and not addressed as a real business issue?
So I think I had a unique perspective. I was pretty fortunate, and then I realized that I kind of looked at it through a human lens, but that transfers to technology as well. But the actual data points existed. I knew as a waiter, and I was in private dining primarily at a fine dining steakhouse here in Chicago. I would know if they needed me and they wouldn't. And I kind of just thought about, why is that? Well, if they're not going to need 4 people to come out on a patio, they're going to cut at least 2 people from the floor. One of the 2 people that are going to come in, they're not going to need them. That person's going to get cut. They're going to wish they could have gone and worked the private dining rooms. Why wouldn't they, when I called at 1 o'clock and asked if I could have been off, say yes? Now they're paying me, they're paying them. I don't want to be there. This person's going to leave. All that data, right? And in my mind, it's, those are just data points. I suppose that existed.
Yeah.
There was a chain of command that could have been known, and that could have been automated. That guy didn't need to tell that lady that needed to tell. Really, if we had put a couple preferences in there, if we would have just let this system and this process understand our preferences, it could do that. And this lady could not get cut at 7 p.m. and go home and pay a babysitter for 3 hours when she didn't make $1. Meanwhile, I'm upstairs making $100. I'd really rather not. I made $500 last night, whatever it is, right? And so I was going, all these data points are there. There are times they're calling me at 7 p.m. going, can you please get here at 8:30 and p.m., right? Because the Bulls game's ending and now we've got to wait in the lobby. Well, that data existed. You knew the Bulls are playing. Every time the Bulls play and it's in Chicago, you're going to get a pop. Schedule some people to come in at 7:30, and you know what? Maybe even find out who wants to be here, because you might have 3 people sitting at home doing absolutely nothing. That pop is good for $200 in your pocket. You have 3 people sitting around wanting $200. However, you're going to make this guy stay late. You're going to have these 2 people come in that don't want to be there. That data existed as well. And it turned out at the time, it was a huge frustration to not know when you were working. And that's why I created the company.
Yeah.
But it's become such a hot topic that it's now being legislated against. In the last 18 months and really in the last 9 months, we're seeing in states like New York, California, Oregon, Washington, here in Illinois and Cook County, laws are being passed making that illegal. So what we created kind of is a feel good, this should be a thing, because why in the heck isn't it? Now it's we can keep you compliant, save you millions, make your workforce happier. Now we start to touch things like sales and training, contests, communication, employee engagement. We're gamifying some of that. So we start to touch a whole lot of tangential things that can make life better for shift workers and their managers. And we're really, 5 years in, I can take my belt a notch down and let out a breath and say we're getting into the fun part, where a lot of the cool stuff that we needed the foundation for is starting to be revealed, and I couldn't be more excited. I think something I'd mentioned that I can tease is that we're even building a social media component of the platform to kind of be like a LinkedIn for shift workers and connect people that way. And just a lot of fun stuff that we're able to tie into shift workers through their schedules.
Man, that's incredible. And I think the biggest takeaway as well for any listeners is looking into the environment and seeing what are the data points that are being missed and what's actually happening, and how can this be replaced using either not just analytics, but artificial intelligence or data or machine learning, or even just processing. If this happens, then do this. Just the simple if then scenarios, right? So it's
just like that platform, if this, then that, right? If you can give a blueprint, then things can be done. And to go back to your questions very briefly about leverage, sure, there's the data. Sure, we can even say, what's not being used or overlooked. And I love that. But then it also gets to the leverage. And you can think of that as a fulcrum. You can look at that as, even thousands of years ago, they were using leverage to, build these great structures. Or leverage is really just how do you take existing things and use it to your advantage. And I think in my situation, all of these data points of who wanted to work when were there, but they weren't being used to get the right people there to make the most money or to stay and not quit and things like that. So I think the leverage piece is, how do you make do with what you have to level up, get to the next level or whatever.
And that kind of goes into your philosophy. How do you make money with no money? How do you do non-traditional forms of fundraising, right? Is that's what stemmed that philosophy? Yeah.
And I think really the catalyst for that one is I found out, they say if you ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money, but it's also no one wants to give you money until you don't need it anymore. But 90% of entrepreneurs are out chasing these dollars that they'll never get. And people say that they do early stage investment. No, they don't. People say they do pre-launch investment. No, they don't. And there may be some anomalies out there, but for the most part, it's a really vicious trap. It's predatory. They're looking for people that need the money so bad that now they can come in and take 51% of the company, or say that widget is great, but why don't you make it a wadget, and totally flip the model on its head. There are people that don't like, when Tesla tried to give free electricity to the world, he was stopped, right? So sometimes people have great ideas, little money comes in and says no. And so when people can maintain their integrity and their creative vision without having to kind of give away some of that control, I think that's where the real magic happens. And we're coming into an age where I know hundreds upon hundreds of people starting companies right now. I think even 10 years ago, I may have known a couple people, and company may have been a little bit looser. And I mean, it's just en masse at a really large scale. People are wanting to bring ideas to life and leverage technology, to use that word again. So I really think the time is now to just help set as many people up for success as possible. And to your point, like, money's great. It's great to make money, great to help people make money, but money is just a resource. Money is just energy as well. It's just an exchange and a transfer of value, whatever that might be. So I think that's where I'm also at with the alternative fundraising and things. If I can go and mention your company on LinkedIn and help you fill your pipeline and get a couple 100,000 views on that, and that's helpful, and then you want to come in and you want to help me with the SEO on my new website to make sure that we index, that's great. And you didn't have to pay me $1,000, and I didn't pay you $1,000. And right, I'm not anti-money, anti-capitalism at all, but I love the kind of collaborative barter. You get what you put in, get out what, kind of that law of reciprocity. So I'm all about, making things happen with or without a dollar.
Creative there. And I want to dive into, I think, something more in the business maturity level of 2 points that you mentioned. The initial was the 5 years. So 5 years to get to this point. That's A, patience, commitment, determination. But second, and this is a pivotal point, is that you mentioned keeping the integrity of the vision, but then bringing in the right people that you knew you needed to fill. So I'd love to dive into, how did you know those positions were, something that you're the own bottleneck? And two, how did you keep the integrity for you to not just give up every kind of equity, like 99% or like all the company, but also maintain yourself in a position to lead the company with the vision?
Yeah, so I think for me, I was really starting to identify some weaknesses of mine as a leader that I didn't necessarily want to work on, right? And then for me, and it probably is for everybody, although there are some resources that need to go in. But I started working with an executive coach that changed my life, and working with her, and again, there was some exchange and transfer of value there. Not cheap at all by any stretch of the imagination, but she basically came in and said, well, you're great at this and that. Looks like these are some areas of opportunity. Do you want to improve on those? And I said no. And she said, well, then we probably should find some people that have. And so I do think the coaching, and that helped, and being honest to myself. But I think I get asked this question fairly often, and I'd love to answer it just a little bit more broadly. And for me, I was able to do it, and I think a lot of people can when they just put their mind to it. But it's just putting the ego to the side. It's that whole I don't need to do everything. I don't need to be the marketer. I might have a 6-figure following on social media, but does that mean I need to run our social media? Absolutely not. Leverage me if you can, and let me go off and be crazy Cory, and I'm not great at finances. I never have been. I used to balance our books. That was a terrible idea, right? So if we get a CPA or something, and they're like, "Wow, this is a huge mess." And but similarly, I would have never tried to be our CTO. I can't write code. I don't know why, we only had me as CEO because we couldn't get a better one until we could. But I think so many people try to take on too much, or the ego says they want people to think they can do it all. Or, once it does have to humble, right? It took me even to humbling myself to say, okay, I can't raise money. I can't sell software, right? Like it turns out I actually can do both, and do both fairly well. But it took the right processes, right? So even something like that, turns out I'm great at selling and raising money. But when I was trying to do too much else at the same time, I couldn't focus on how to get that good. Or people are coming in going, you need to use Salesforce.com. What's your CRM? And I'm going, how do you want your steak cooked? And what Napa cab do you want again? It was such a disconnect. It's like you need to surround yourself with people that can, fairly assess and then jump in and help when you need it. So that's my team now. I mean, they're very kind, and they'd probably give you a long list of my strengths, but they all could tell you in their sleep what my weaknesses are. They all know what they're there to keep Cory off the rails for, for lack of a better way to put it. So, it really does. It takes accountability. It takes different perspectives. Yep. Yeah. Self-awareness. And then humility, I think, is a big one.
And I love, and that's what I mentioned also with the business maturity. It's not just the ego play. You're doing that. It's looking into being honest with yourself, honest with the team, and actually being humble about it and saying, this is the team that I need in order to build and actually drive this vision. That's incredible. I want to dive a little bit more into the actual, service, Shedwool. So can you explain a little bit who it's for, what it does, and some of the exciting things that may not be seen just from the front end?
Yeah, so at the heart of what we do, we're an employee scheduling platform, web and mobile based. We've got mobile apps on the App Store, Google Play. We don't charge for the download of our mobile apps, and that's more employee facing. Mm-hmm. What we offer is a scheduling platform where managers can publish a schedule. People can see when they work, who they work with, request mm-hmm. time off, track their hours, clock in and out. We have a messaging and a media component, so people could do things like pre-shift meetings, sales initiatives, training for new employees, messaging, for a new product mix or things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And so it really just ties people into their schedules. It also keeps companies compliant because companies now are required legally to provide a 24/7 digital access to those schedules for people whose schedules change. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we do on a very simple level. Yep. But what we're building in is a number of machine learning and algorithms to help by industry, by market, help company staff intelligently, make sure the right people are working when they want to with each other, making sure that there's not overstaffing in the low times, making sure that they're not run too thin, because that can impact both the top and bottom line. So we're doing a lot of that kind of business intelligence, machine learning, deep machine learning as well. And then what we're having fun with is we're figuring out ways, and we've got some cool things in the works, but to gamify some of this to actually help employees either make more money or be more productive at work, and gamify that in ways that, is just huge win-wins across the board. We really pride ourselves on our customer service and on our price point as well. I mean, we're very competitive on price. We're about 70% less than our competitors. Wow. And the space is red hot. Our big competitors last round was $100 million. We just saw a close competitor raise an $82 million Series A round, which is the biggest A round out of Australia where they're headquartered. Wow. We saw a close competitor of ours bought by Intuit QuickBooks last year for $350 million plus or minus a million or two. And so the space is hot, but there hasn't been any disruption in the decade, and there really hasn't been any innovation. And most of the products are very similar, but lacking in integration to a lot of the things that really a scheduling software should speak to. So that's another big thing that we're coming out with, is a full integration hub. So not just an API, not just an SDK. I mean, we have those type of things available, but true integration, so we can plug and play with POS and payroll and HR and different software solutions that'll really be of value. Yeah.
That's incredible. How do you define disruption in a marketplace?
To me, disruption is changing customer behavior, consumer behavior, whatever it might be, for a mutual gain. So it should help the end user, being a customer, as well as the company. So anything to me that's disruptive should make an offering or product more profitable for the company offering it, but maybe cheaper for the people, or more accessible to the people. Right. So there's that bridge, right, where it should benefit the offerer and the person that's receiving as well.
Oh, that's incredible. And I love that answer that you mentioned, both value creation for the end user and the originator. So,
and I guess the other definition quickly of disruption or disruptive would be something that's never been seen before. But I think in 2020 that actually doesn't exist. So
I think it's the old adage that we've already been seeing everything. The market's jaded. It's how do you present either something new in a new way or actually shift behavior? That's incredible. I think the last question I have, and I want to dive into this before we talk about how we can connect with you on social. When you're creating these types of networks or these types of platforms for multi-user interface, how are you leveraging or using network effects to create not only the end product better, but the user experience better?
So if I understand your question correctly, we've got a lot of exciting things going into that. We're letting all of our users put their social media on Shedwool so they can connect with each other where they play. We're allowing employees to send invites to their company to people that they know that are looking for a job. So you get that social proof.
Mm-hmm.
The social media component's going to be huge. So waiters in a certain market can get to know each other. More insights from prospective employers. But I think for me, at the end of the day, it's all about community, unity, and empathy. And so anywhere where people can get to know each other, what they're about, whether it's a boss, whether it's a company, a lot of people are waiters that swear they want to be bartenders until they find out that it's a lot of ice buckets and cutting limes and lemons and getting yelled at and stiffed on tips. And it's like, had they had a forum and a place to really find that out, they might have just kept waiting tables. Or maybe they wanted to go drive Ferraris all day as a valet out front, make twice as much money, and people just don't know what's available. So I think for me, the network effect is just knowledge is key. Community. Right now, there's really nowhere online that a restaurant group would go to hire. I found out the other day a national restaurant chain that's a customer of Shedwool's is about to have to rehire at least 30% of their workforce. They don't know where to go to get it.
Wow.
So the network effect to me is huge. And so we're solving for that as well. We'd already been kind of doing that. So when they brought that problem to me, I said, lucky for you, right? But again, right place, right time. And it's like the meme where you see just a little tip of the iceberg up top. People are like, wow, that was quick. It's like, was it? Or have I been working on that for 2 years and put $100,000 of my own money?
Exactly. Oh, that's exciting, man. Well, where can listeners go to thank you for this episode or connect with you on social?
Oh, that's really kind of you. Twitter is only finally, as of a few days ago, starting to acknowledge that I exist. I've been on there forever. I love it. But so I should be Cory Connects on there on Instagram. Cory Connects, CORY Connects is my hashtag on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to keep up on my content, Cory Connects is a great way to do that. Follow the hashtag. I engage with anyone that engages back. If anyone goes on and follows me, I try to follow all my followers back. It's I've been averaging about 600 new followers a day right now. And as you can imagine, it gets a little hard. I really try to keep up. Anytime I see someone that's engaging with me that I'm not following, I just make sure I go follow them right away. I assume that they're a follower. I don't give enough love to Facebook when I'm there. That's a great way how I get in touch with influencers. And now that people, I don't know if jokingly but now that people think I'm an influencer, the smart ones are finding that you message me on Facebook, I'll see it, I'll reply. If you message me on LinkedIn, I'll see it a year later and apologize to you for never seeing the darn thing, right? And then interestingly, for a 42-year-old man, and people wish this wasn't the case, and I'm not as active as I should be, but I can be found both on Snapchat and on TikTok. I believe that's also Cory.
There you
Connects.
go.
I think my TikToks are the funniest thing ever, but so many people disagree that I've been asked not to do them for a while. So my most recent TikTok is probably a month old.
A lot of options. We'll put those on the show notes. But Cory, man, thank you for being on, man.
Well, it was a pleasure. I've come to know you. You are awesome. Love the show. Love what you do for your community as well. And look forward to connecting even more with you and your listeners. And I appreciate everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, man.